Welcome to part 2 of my Darling in the Franxx rewrite series. If you haven't seen part 1 already, or if it's been a while since you have, I would recommend watching that first and then coming back to watch this later. In that video, I went over my changes to episode 19, the flashback episode. But if you don't have a lot of time or just want a quick recap, here's a summary. If you don't need it, you can jump to this timecode. Alright, so the world in my version of the show is different. When the flashback starts, APE and Papa are already in power, Karina Milsa is already dead, and Franxx has a daughter. We learn that he gave her up to APE as part of an indoctrination ceremony, where APE takes in children around 7 years old and raises them to be members of society. Papa then meets with Franxx, asking him for help in creating the delivery mechanism for his Immortality Serum. Because in my version of the show, the immortality procedure has two parts, the thing that delivers the serum and the serum itself. Also, it requires constant injections. After Franxx creates the machine, the immortality procedure becomes widespread, with the side effects still being infertility. 10 years pass when the first couple of Klaxosaur attacks happen. Franxx is put in charge of the anti-Klaxosaur effort and receives a sample of the princess's DNA. He then creates the Franxx and finds that children are the best pilots. In an attempt to create better pilots, he makes 02 and the Nines, which happens before he meets the princess. And when he does meet her, he learns the truth about the war and the Klaxosaurs. He confronts Papa with this knowledge, but is dismissed, and the episode ends with Franxx gathering the files about the children of Plantation 13. So, that's everything from part 1. Right now, I've made a lot of changes to episode 19, but I haven't really explained why. For good reason though. That episode should have really served as setup for the last arc, which I don't feel like it does in the original. We learn more about the world, sure, but it doesn't end up being that relevant to the story. And we learn more about Franxx, but he's pretty much the same person from the beginning to the end, so it's kind of pointless. With my new timeline, I've set up ideas that will come back later, and I've revealed that Franxx knows something about this war that makes us question what his true motivations are. Those are things to keep in mind when going into the next couple of episodes. I kept a lot of the story beats the same, but the things we learn about the world will be very different. Episode 20 starts off pretty much the same. The squad is briefed on the upcoming mission by new Nana, because old Nana was replaced because she had an emotional breakdown earlier in the show. Their goal is to protect the Grand Crevasse from attack as APE tries to take control of the star entity. In a separate conversation, Papa tells Hiro and 02 that their job is to implant Strelitzia into its core. Then we see Hachi discussing the Hringhorny with Dr. Franxx. I'm gonna make a slight change here in that we don't learn what the Hringhorny is in this conversation. If you don't remember, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't because I completely forgot about this thing, the Hringhorny is this giant spear? It's not explained very well outside of the fact that it's a weapon, but that doesn't matter since I'm going to change what it is later on. But Hachi tells Franxx that it's ready, which he seems slightly concerned by. Then things flow pretty much the same from the original. The horde of Klaxosaurs are detected heading towards the Grand Crevasse, and all the parasites are deployed to defend. Alright, this is where my changes really start in this episode. Hachi, Franxx, Hiro, and 02 head down the Grand Crevasse with Strelitzia. When they reach the bottom, Hachi informs them that a Klaxosaur has been detected heading towards them at high speed. From their station, Papa tells Franxx to hurry and get Strelitzia into the star entity, but Franxx turns off his communicator, cutting him off mid-sentence. The Klaxosaur bursts through, knocking everyone over. The dust begins to settle, and the princess emerges from the dragon Klaxosaur. Franxx begins to stand and tells her that he knew she would come, but this was sooner than he expected. She turns to face Franxx and tells him that it was foolish of him not to listen to her warning all those years ago. She lurches forward, violently pinning Franxx to the ground. 02 runs towards them but gets knocked away. Franxx yells for all of them to stay back. Franxx asks the princess, "So, have you come to take back the star entity?" She replies, "I refuse to have stolen what we worked so hard to create. I will not let you stop me." Franxx responds, "I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to make sure this ends for good." Hiro and 02 turn to Franxx, confused. "You're the last one who can pilot it, right? And you know full well that you can't pilot it alone." Franxx turns to Hiro, "Take the boy with you." Hiro is shocked, saying that he won't pilot with her, and that he would never betray the others like that. Franxx turns to face him. "You want to fight for all your futures, don't you? You must go with her. There's no other way." Before Hiro can respond, the princess grabs him and begins to pilot Strelitzia. 02 tries to chase them, but Hachi holds her back under Franxx's orders. Strelitzia opens the door to the star entity and enters. The council hears the news and are shocked by the turn of events. One of the members asks how Franxx could be so careless. Papa tells the rest that he didn't want things to end in this way, but it seems that it must. Hachi, Franxx, and 02 watch Strelitzia's vitals from a control room. Hachi is impressed that the princess can connect with Strelitzia. 02 demands answers from Franxx. He turns to both of them and says that it's time they knew the truth about the Klaxosaurs. We cut to the princess in the cockpit with Hiro, who tells her that he's surprised she can pilot Strelitzia. She replies that, of course, she can. She was the one who designed it after all. Her horn starts to glow, and she begins to broadcast her thoughts to everyone. Today is the day that Papa and APE will pay for their sins, for the lives they've taken, and the futures they've stolen. I will not be defeated by the weapons we've created, built on the sorrows of my brothers and sisters. Hachi asks Franxx what she means. Franxx responds, I knew from the start that the Klaxosaurs were biomechanical weapons, but they were more complex than anything I had seen before. I noticed they had female chromosomes with male chromosomes at its core, and I designed the Franxx to operate in a similar fashion to fend them off. But the original designs? Those came from the princess herself. I couldn't even come close to creating something like that on my own. The princess has an intelligence that surpasses even mine. But for a long time, I wondered how a design like that came about. And that's when I learned. We cut to the princess, who continues to broadcast her thoughts. Soldiers of APE, do you know where the Immortality Serum comes from? A silence falls on the battlefield. It's a substance based on magma energy, that's true. But the essential ingredient needed to make it work is extracted from children. The process mutates their bodies, leaving their souls trapped in their flesh, robbing them of their humanity, and then they're discarded. I fell victim to this process, but was somewhat of an anomaly. It gave me abilities, and I discovered that I could hear the cries of all my brothers and sisters who were trapped. Some asked to be set free, while others asked to set things right. So I bonded their souls to these biomechanical bodies to turn them into immortal weapons that could fight APE's injustices. I will not allow this to continue any longer. The kids of Squad 13 freeze in shock, unsure of how to react. The princess begins to implant Strelitzia into the core of the star entity. Papa announces from the space station, it's a shame that a tool such as the star entity has to go to waste, but it no longer matters. Those children were fulfilling their role in our society, all in hopes of achieving salvation. But immortality was never our goal. We see all the council's garments fall away, and lights shoot out from every plantation and head towards the APE space station. Strelitzia Apis emerges from the ground, charging up the beam on its head. The princess yells, I will not let you do as you please. The beam fires at the station, destroying it. 9 Alpha yells for Papa. The dust begins to settle. Then the voices of Papa and the rest of APE ring out. Salvation is to transcend the physical and become of one mind. Purple lights begin to form together and descend from the sky. We have assimilated all the souls of those willing to join us to protect our society and our way of life. Together, we are a new being. Verm. Okay, so let's talk about the Klaxosaurs and Verm for a second. My biggest problem with this conflict in the original is that it turns the intimate battle that the children had with the adults into a war between two parties that we've never heard of. And like I said before, it makes everything that's happened in the story up until now feel pointless. Now, the conflict that the Klaxosapiens have with Verm is similar to the one that the Squad faces. That's true. But, and this is a big but, this reveal happens like 4 episodes before the finale. There might have been hints, but there was absolutely no build-up to sudden aliens, let alone a grand war between two ancient societies. It is too late in the show to introduce us to a conflict this large. My original goal was to get rid of Verm and position APE in a way so that they could become the main antagonists for the show. I don't think it surprised anyone when it turned out that Papa was evil, but in order for that to happen, I needed to think of the proper motivation, and that's when I asked myself, what if this was a Verm origin story? If APE's goal was to become a hive mind from the start, no aliens, no outside forces, then the conflict would flow naturally from this story. The children's battle against a societal hive mind that doesn't care about their futures turns from a metaphor into a reality. This was always the fight. There wasn't any need to introduce aliens. So, in my version of this arc, Papa and APE's goal was to create a hive mind of all the adults in their society to protect their way of life, calling that collective hive mind Verm. But now, that leaves the Klaxosaurs. If I want to position Verm in this way, then the Klaxosaurs can't be the remnant of an ancient civilization. And if we're supposed to eventually side with them against Papa, then their reason for fighting has to resonate with Squad 13. This is where my changes to the Immortality Serum come into play. By having Papa create the serum, and by having children as its essential ingredient, this accomplishes a couple of things. 1. It makes good on the vampire anagram. I don't think that it's an accident that together APE and Verm spell out vampire. With this setup, they literally steal the lives away from children. But, more importantly, this change makes the Klaxosaur struggles infinitely more relatable to Squad 13. From the start of the show, the adults have always seen the children as tools. They are sent off in robots to protect an indifferent society's way of life. By having the Immortality Serum come from children, Squad 13 can better relate to the Klaxosaur struggle. They are fighting for the same things. This change is also the reason why the immortality procedure requires regular injections. It implies that this is something that APE continues to do, which gives the squad even more of a reason to turn against them. So, in my version of this story, the Klaxosaurs are the result of the Immortality Serum, biomechanical weapons that are bonded with the souls of children. With this new conflict, Squad 13 has a legitimate stake in this fight, and it's one that they've been fighting from the start of the show. Now, is this still a lot of information to take in? Yes, but this doesn't entirely come out of left field. If you look at the way children are treated at the beginning of the show, and the way they are viewed in my new flashback, it's not unreasonable to think that Papa would use children in this way. It's narratively and thematically consistent with everything we've seen so far. Alright, let's wrap up this episode. As Verm begins to descend, the princess starts to choke as purple veins start to fill the cockpit of Strelitzia. We hear Verm speak again. We hope to take the star entity into space with the Ringhorny to spread our will, but it seems that's no longer an option. In the event that it became compromised, we set it to explode, destroying the planet and neutralizing the threats to our cause. The Ringhorny emerges from the ground, and in my version, it's not a spear. It's another massive mech similar in appearance to Strelitzia apis. I'm not married to any particular look, but if I had to say, it would be like a male version of Strelitzia apis, just to complete the Christian imagery of the show, the Adam to Strelitzia's Eve. Anyways, Verm's form enters the Ringhorny, and its eyes begin to glow purple. Everyone is shocked and confused. Hiro struggles in the cockpit with the princess. The squad stands motionless. Dr. Franxx cries out, and 02 watches from the control room in horror as Strelitzia apis becomes engulfed in metal and purple veins. Ending episode 20. So, this was an episode of reveals. Verm is revealed as the true antagonists of the show, and now we know the history and motivations of the Klaxosaurs. I used a lot of the build-up from the beginning part of the show, and planted some seeds in episode 19 in order to set up the fight in this way. In general, it's a battle for the same things from the original, but now presented in a different context, one that I think is more understandable and easier to buy into, which was the main thing that I wanted to do. Also, I want to mention this here because I don't know if I'll be able to get to it later, but I really don't like how in the original, Verm says that they want to assimilate others because it'll bring peace and harmony to the universe or something. Worrying about the greater good was never really the vibe I got from them. To me, they're a physical representation of a society indifferent to children's futures. I don't think they should be concerned with the well-being of anyone besides themselves. So, that's the angle I'm going to run with in my version. Verm becomes a hive mind for their own gain. They see it as preserving their society's happiness. They force others they deem worthy to join because they believe their way of life is superior and are willing to crush anyone who opposes them. That's a slight tweak I'm making to their motivation. Alright, let's get to episode 21. Like the original, it's mostly a fight and picks up right where we left off. Small Klaxosaurs start attacking the Ringhorny, but it doesn't do much. The Ringhorny raises one of its arms and its hand starts radiating a purple light. Unmanned Franxx units burst out of the plantations controlled by Verm and are sent to destroy the opposing forces. In the control room, Dr. Franxx tells Hachi and 02 that Hiro managed to delay the bomb in Strelitzia Apis. Meanwhile, the rest of Squad 13 decide to head back to the Grand Crevasse to plan their next moves. We cut to the Nines who are still trying to fend off the Klaxosaurs. 9 Alpha looks unsure of his actions. Then we hear the other 9 start to scream. Confused, 9 Alpha turns to see the others frozen and struggling. He starts to feel a pain in his head himself as Papa starts to enter their minds. We hear his voice say, "There is no use in resisting. You belong to us." One of the other 9 starts to go frantic in their units and starts shooting at the Verm soldiers, but it's easily overtaken and destroyed. We see 9 Alpha watch in horror as his eyes begin to glow purple. So I'm giving Verm a couple of new abilities. Mostly being able to control unmanned Franxx units and being able to control the minds of the 9s. I know it's kind of a weird assortment of powers, but I think it flows naturally from the type of being Verm is at this point. Then we cut to Hiro and the princess struggling in Strelitzia Apis. For a moment, Hiro enters her mind and feels immense sadness. He asks her how long she's been fighting for. She responds that she's been fighting all her life. From here, the princess would explain the history of APE to Hiro, the things we went over in episode 19, as well as her backstory. Like all other children, her parents gave her up when she was 7 to APE. She was a genius among her peers, on track to become an APE engineer. But when she spoke up against using magma energy, Papa deemed her a threat and took away her humanity for the Immortality Serum. The process left her like how she is now, and she, along with others, retreated into the ruins of the time before APE. Since then, they've been trying to stop them so that other children wouldn't have a similar fate. But now, she's the last one like her left. Hiro asks her if there's any more that they could do, but she replies that there isn't. That's just a broad summary of that conversation, but it really hammers home the idea that Hiro and the squad have been fighting children just like them all along. It's deeply personal, and I think that type of connection was missing in the original with the Klaxosapiens. Anyways, we cut to 02 talking with Dr. Franxx in the control room. He reveals to her that she and the 9s are beings based off of the princess's DNA, and that when the star entity was discovered, APE wanted her to pilot it on their behalf. This is just a little thing, but I don't want to say that they're clones since they aren't really, even in the original, but that's beside the point. 02 says that none of that matters anymore and that she's going to save Hiro. Franxx tells her that it's useless. Hachi adds that the door to the star entity will only open in the presence of the princess's DNA, and that even though 02 is based off of that DNA, it's been altered far too much to be a match. 02 tells them that she made a promise to Hiro to be with him, and that she has to try. Franxx looks down at his hand, and after a moment, tells her that he'll go with her. As 02 and Dr. Franxx start to leave, Squad 13 bursts into the Grand Crevasse, fighting off Verm units. This is where we would have that little battle, and when Ichigo and Goro would escort them to the entrance. We cut to Hiro again as he continues to struggle. The princess asks why he continues to fight even though they've already lost. He tells her, "All my life, I thought my only purpose was to fight. But now I realize that there's more to my life than that. I made a promise to 02 to be with her, and I want to keep trying to make that future a reality." The Ringhorny starts its rockets, with the 9 standing beside it, as Papa says that it's time to leave this world behind. Then we see Ichigo and Goro drop Franxx and 02 off at the entrance as they continue to defend against Verm units. Alright, now we're at the point in the episode just before the climax. The true villains and heroes of the story have been revealed, and the squad is at their lowest point. They need to save Hiro and deactivate the bomb, but they don't know how. I'm pretty sure some of you already know how this scene is going to play out. It's similar to the original, with one very big change. Dr. Franxx stands in front of the door to the star entity. He rips the sleeve off of his non-bionic arm and raises it. Tendrils emerge from the door, latching onto it and ripping his arm off. 02 rushes to him, asking why he would do that. He tells her that it had to be done as the door opens. She asks, how is that possible? He replies that he had a feeling it would work. He tells her, I've done many terrible things in my life, and stole away so many futures. I hope this can be enough to atone for my sins. Franxx tells 02 to go to Hiro. Things play out in a similar way to the original from here. 02 reaches Hiro, who is nearly dead, and she kisses him in an attempt to wake him up. The princess watches and remarks that this love is the thing she always wanted to protect. She gives Hiro and 02 the last bit of her strength, disarming the bomb and revealing the red and white Strelitzia Apis. We cut to Franxx lying on the ground, the building crumbling around him as Strelitzia Apis rises. He reaches up, crying, asking if he was able to do enough, if he was able to make it up to his daughter, the princess, as he's crushed by falling debris. And this is the other big change that I made. I said in part 1 that I had 2 goals in mind when sitting down to rewrite this arc. The first was to get rid of Worm. The second was to fix Franxx's arc. In the original, he is introduced as an evil scientist character, and his flashback episode reinforced that idea. We learn that he wants to find or create the perfect being, which is why he's obsessed with the Klaxosaur princess. He helps the squad in the end because he wants to see Strelitzia Apis, the thing he sees as the perfect being. If that was his arc, his whole journey in the original, I would be okay with that. I don't think it's very good, but it's something and it's coherent. But that isn't where his story ends. Because for some inexplicable reason, we find out that he's saved the children who didn't become pilots and wants Nana and Hachi to become their new adults. Why on earth would he ever do something like that? There is absolutely no reason why his character, as it is set up in the original show, would ever make a decision like that. There is a moment just before he dies when he apologizes to 02 and acknowledges the terrible things he's done that makes me believe that at some point he's had a change of heart, but in order for that to make sense, we would have needed a scene where he realized that what he's doing is wrong. And that scene just doesn't exist. It's a crucial moment that's missing because this decision to protect the children is ultimately what saves all of humanity. There needs to be some explanation for why Franxx would do this. By making the princess his daughter, I realized that I could turn Franxx into this tragic figure. If the princess is his daughter, and the Immortality Serum comes from children that turns them into Klaxosaurs, then Franxx can feel regret for putting her through all of that. Even more so if he felt responsible in doing so. That's why the Immortality Serum has 2 parts in my version. This way, Franxx can have a hand in its distribution, but not know that children are its essential ingredient. When he meets the princess and learns the truth, he'll feel personally responsible for what happened to her and see the error in society's way of thinking. Not only did they allow this to happen, they also quashed the potential she had. I made a point to emphasize that the princess is brilliant, and that brilliance is wasted because APE couldn't see the value in her. Those revelations will fuel Franxx's eventual turn against APE, along with his regret in his treatment of 02. In my version, I had him create 02 before meeting the princess. That way, when he puts her through all of those awful tests when she was little, he'll be horrified by the idea that he practically did all of that to his own daughter. Those things are his motivation in my version of the show, and his first encounter with the princess will be the moment that was missing in the original, the moment when he has a change of heart. All his actions throughout the show are the result of this, and it gives a reason for a lot of things. Franxx treats 02 the way he does in the beginning because he sees her as his daughter. He starts the experiment at Plantation 13 because he wants them to rise up against Papa, teaching them to be independent. And he saves the children at the end because he wants them to have a future when APE is gone. Alright, let's wrap this episode up. As the Hringhorny and the Nines start to fly to space, Strelitzia Apis charges up the laser on its head. Hiro connects with 02 and enters her mind. He begins to see images of them together, but there's something else. Images of people that he's never seen before. Strelitzia Apis fires a shot at the Hringhorny and damages it significantly. Worm manages to escape, but no, they can't proceed with the damage they've taken and can't return back to Earth. we hear Papa's voice say that they'll be back to destroy them once and for all, as they, the Nines, and the rest of the Verm fleet set a course for the moon. We cut to the inside of Strelitzia, where we see Hiro. He smiles and asks 02 if she's alright, but there's no response. 02 is dead, ending episode 21. So, those are my changes for episodes 20 and 21. The overall conflict for the show is generally the same, but now it has an entirely different context. One that I think makes a lot more sense and relates better to the struggles that Squad 13 faces. I also gave Franxx a more definitive arc with a motivation that makes his actions throughout the show understandable. Now, as we go into the last half of this arc, the Squad has had their biggest victory at a great cost, and the remaining episodes will focus on how they pick up the pieces as they prepare for Verm's eventual return. But I will save all of that for part 3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll have part 3 of this out soon. There's one more really big change that I made that I think fixes my biggest problem with the final battle, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave them below and subscribe if you like. I would really appreciate it.